Welcome to a special video presentation coming to you from the National Conference of Bankruptcy Judges in Las Vegas. This is being brought to you by the American Bankruptcy Institute. I am Bill Rochelle, ABI's editor-at-large. Our guest to talk for the next few minutes is Leslie Berkoff, partner in the firm of Moritt, Hock, and Hamroff, located both in Manhattan and on Long Island. Leslie here is involved in a whole bunch of things, such as mediation, among others. But, and for the sake of our conversation now, she does a great deal of work in both artificial intelligence, or more properly, IT, intellectual technology, and things of that sort, as well as healthcare. So tell me this, Leslie. Do those two, cybersecurity and hospitals, ever intersect?
Yes, they do.
Oh, really? Any examples recently?
Well, goodness, if you were reading the papers in May, you would have seen WannaCry, and that's just one example.
And what was that?
WannaCry was the attack that happened primarily over in Britain and a lot of the other surrounding countries, where a group of cyber terrorists, for lack of a better word, seized hold of machines, mostly through hospitals, some related banking institutions. And when you opened up your computer that day, it basically requested $300 in Bitcoin in order to receive access or grant you access back to your information.
And so what happened to hospitals?
Well, most of the hospitals, primarily in the England area, they are linked together. So are some of the other European countries. And they were incapable of servicing their patients.
You're kidding.
They didn't have access to patient records. They didn't have access to health insurance. They were concerned about prescribing meds or providing treatment with contraindications for other diseases or ailments. One side of the hospital couldn't talk to the other. So a doctor that was treating one patient couldn't consult with a specialist in the other because the phone systems were shut down in some of these hospitals.
Oh, my goodness. Well, listen, thank goodness so far nothing like that has happened in the United States, but what is the typical concern about cybersecurity in the U.S. with respect to healthcare institutions?
We'll talk about that in 1 second. Actually, it has happened a couple of times, more than a couple of times, in the United States as well. Probably about 10 examples over the last year and a half as well,
dear.
On a smaller scale. But the primary concern when you ask about this is the fact that the third parties are gaining access to information, private information.
So what do they have in hospital files that is interesting or valuable about patients?
Well, aside from the fact that...
Who cares about my blood type? I mean, what difference does that make?
Nah, nobody really cares about your blood type, Bill. But what we do care about is your date of birth, your social security number,
Oh, really?
your insurance card. How'd you pay for that hospital visit? Did you give a credit card? Did you pay with a check?
Oh, really?
And you are obviously well off. There are people that are not as well off. What if they made a request to the hospital for financial accommodations, and they had their brother, their husband, their father guarantee it? They then provided financial information. They may have provided tax returns in order to support the fact that they might not be able to sustain payment for the treatment at full price. So now you have third parties' information, their social security numbers. Now somebody goes ahead and becomes you, becomes me, becomes you and goes get health treatment under your insurance plan, and you go to get something and you can't.
Well, it sounds to me like they have maybe even more information about me than Equifax did.
Oh, yes. Well, Equifax had plenty of information, and what's scary about that is that for 4 months, people were trolling around in Equifax's system, pilfering information, and they didn't know a thing. So who was minding the minder on that one?
Right, so Leslie, tell me, in a insolvency of a healthcare institution, what are the issues in terms of internet security?
Well, the first and biggest problem is you already have a distressed entity. So we know that funding is being cut tremendously. Believe it or not, in most hospitals, distressed or not distressed, IT costs are at the bottom of the budget line. Now you're dealing with absolute minimal priority, and not everybody recognizes how important it is to keep this information safe. Do you know in the WannaCry scare, had they dealt with a small patch, a very innocuous amount over the course of everything, could have prevented a significant amount. But because it wasn't on the forefront, because so many hospitals today, other than teaching hospitals, are using antiquated equipment and don't have the cutting edge of high T. You don't even have to actually have the cutting edge, just something relatively advanced or even on trend. They are tremendously at risk.
You mean the ones that don't have the most recent
correct.
Technology? It's the old stuff.
The old stuff, but you don't even have to be, when I say cutting edge, you don't have to be NASA, you don't have to be the government, but you have to be relatively on par. You have to take some basic steps and measures. So if you don't, and now you have a distressed debt situation, well, how are you going to protect that information? Think of all the examples I gave you of theft of information and all the claims it could lead to.
Well, what about this? What if you had a really exaggerated situation, sort of like in Britain, where they shut down a system and somebody dies?
Right.
What are the issues there?
You're going to have a claim. Think about that. There's going to be a claim, and the claim could be a claim for the tort against the hospital. What about the claim against the officers and directors for breaching a duty of care in not making a decision as to whether or not proper technical measures were taken to ensure that the systems were protected, at least reasonably. There's a limit at which you can do, and it's usually the business judgment rule test, but certainly not upgrading on an average a system is probably not a good use of business judgment. They're not going to have the insurance that would cover that. Cyber insurance exists. It's not easy. It's not cheap, but they're not going to have the money to pay for that, which might deal with those claims. We're lucky half the time if they can sustain the insurance for the physical property.
Yes, I see your point. Well, let's put it this way. When you're going into an insolvency proceeding, the lender is going to give you a bare bones budget.
Absolutely going to.
So what would be the strategy to try to free up some bucks to have adequate cybersecurity?
Well, in my mind, I think one of the things that a debtor could do, or a debtor's counsel could do, is take advantage of the fact that if you are a healthcare system or the provider of healthcare services, there should be a patient care ombudsman under Section 333 of the Bankruptcy Code. That ombudsman is there.
So what could the ombudsman do?
Well, they're not
I thought they were supposed to protect patients. What is this?
They are.
Oh,
they are.
Maybe that's it.
Think about it. They're not going to. They're not going to care about officers and directors' liability, and they certainly care about the officers and directors. But if the patients are going to be compromised in their health care and their well-being because a cyber threat may cyber attack may shut down the hospital system, then the PCO could advocate for funding in the budget at least to provide a minimum of protection and attention.
But why would the bankruptcy judge care?
Well, the last thing a bankruptcy judge wants is somebody dying on his watch or her watch.
Oh.
And they're going to care because the PCO is there to protect the people. It's a very different case. It's one thing when widgets in a factory, are damaged. I mean, that has repercussions. It has monetary claims. But if somebody, as a result of the inability to fund certain basic obligations, is injured or dies, they're going to care. The end result may be if the money can't be there and can't get there, that hospital may have to be shut down and the patients transferred elsewhere. But if a lender or the creditors want to maximize the value of the assets and get a greater return on the investment, and that is as a result of an ongoing operation, then there needs to be some negotiation and understanding on how to deal with it.
I see. Very interesting. Well, Lisa Berkoff, I thank you very much for this enlightening few minutes. I mean, I go to doctors all the time, just like you and everybody else did, but I hadn't thought about these cybersecurity issues, especially in the context of insolvency. But I guess it's sort of like the old medical saying, an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. So I guess they need to apply that as well to the question of cybersecurity in healthcare facilities. Lisa or Leslie, I thank you very much. Be well and come back and see us again.
Thank you so much.